Hi, everyone, and welcome to the virtual story session, Portraits of Resilience, hosted by Inspire and Health Story Collaborative. I'm Eric Taylor from Inspire, and I have the pleasure of welcoming you and introducing Doctors Annie Brewster and Jonathan Adler of Health Story Collaborative, who will lead the program with our fantastic guest speakers, Estela Lugo and Christopher Anselmo. First, let's go over a few housekeeping items. We'll be taking questions from you. You can submit your questions to the speakers at any time during our hour-long program using the questions section in your control panel. The speakers will be answering your questions at the end of your program today. Also, if you're having any technical issues, you can use the questions function on the control panel to let us know. Today's program is being recorded. A link to the recording will be sent to everyone who registered. Please be sure to check your inbox within a few weeks of today. For those of you who are already members of Inspire, welcome. And for the others, we're glad you're attending this event, and we encourage you to check out Inspire, an online community of more than 2 million patients and caregivers at www.inspire.com, and join a support group there. You can join anonymously one or more of our many groups organized by medical condition, and many of those are supported by a nonprofit patient advocacy organization. Since our mission is to accelerate life-changing discoveries through patients and caregivers, a program like this that puts the patient narrative at the center is so important to us. And now, I'm happy to introduce Annie Brewster and Jonathan Adler of Health Story Collaborative. Take it away, Dr. Brewster and Dr. Adler.
Thank you so much, Eric. Good afternoon to everybody, and thanks for joining us here. We are very happy to be here and thrilled that we're collaborating with Inspire on this event, Portraits of Resilience. So I want to get to the heart of the program, but just briefly, I want to tell you a little bit about me and have John tell you a bit about him and about Health Story Collaborative. So I'm a practicing internal medicine doctor. Also, I'm a patient living with MS since 2001, and I founded Health Story Collaborative in 2013, really as a response to what I feel is broken in the healthcare system, based on my experience both as a patient and a doctor. And really, I would say that that boils down to not enough time and space for stories, honoring the stories of people's lives. And so that's really our goal at Health Story Collaborative, is to create time and space for story exchange within healthcare. All of our programs are grounded in research, and John Adler is our research expert, the Chief Academic Officer of Health Story Collaborative, and he'll tell you a bit more about himself in a few minutes. So as you know, the theme for tonight is resilience, and it came out of us being inspired by a photo contest that Inspire, that's a big word right now, hosted in 2020 with the goal of helping people to overcome isolation through sharing stories through photos. And so I want to kick us off tonight just by having us watch a short video clip that's 1.5 minutes long to show you some of the photos that came in and were tagged with the theme of resilience. Amazing to see. Thanks for sharing that. So I encourage you all who are in the audience to think about what resilience means to you as we move through the program tonight, and maybe even to conjure up an image of what your portrait of resilience would look like. I know that resilience is a bit of an overused buzzword these days, but I think it is a very real and important concept, especially right now as we're navigating a global pandemic. Broadly, we could define resilience as sort of the ability to adapt and persevere in the face of challenge, mental or physical. So resilient people bend, they don't break in the face of adversity, and maybe can even grow stronger in the face of adversity following a challenge. The good news is that we can develop resilience. It can be grown like a muscle. And so we believe that there are many different ways to do that, and storytelling is one way that you can increase. Many of the characteristics in the literature that have been correlated with resilience, think like having a strong social network and having a strong sense of purpose and meaning in life, are themes that we pull for when we work with people on storytelling. So tonight, we're really lucky to hear two stories of resilience told by Chris Anselmo and Estela Lugo. And what we're seeing tonight is called a healing story session. And there's a lot of preparation that comes up to this moment where we work with the storytellers to craft their stories and edit them and then prepare to share them live with you. So I just want to thank Chris and Estella for a tremendous amount of work that has gone into this and a lot of courage. And it's really a gift to all of us to be here. And thank you to the audience members for coming out to witness these stories. And our hope would be that you open yourself up to the experience and really, as I said, think about your own resilience and your own stories, what resonates, what doesn't, as we move through the program. Now I'm just going to turn it over to John briefly, and then we'll be lucky enough to hear from the storyteller.
Thanks so much, Annie. And yes, thanks to Inspire for co-hosting this event with us. And thanks to Chris and Estella for the really stellar work that they've done on your stories. It's going to be such a treat to get to share them with you. So very briefly, so I'm an academic clinical psychologist, and my research focuses on the ways in which we constitute a sense of self by telling stories about our lives. And I'm especially interested in the ways in which people make meaning out of challenging life experiences and how those stories influence their mental health. So Annie and I have worked closely together over the years to apply the broad body of scientific literature on narrative to the programs that we've developed at Health Story Collaborative. So as you may or may not know, there's a growing movement within academic medicine, sometimes broadly called the medical humanities, or more narrowly, narrative medicine. And Annie and I are huge fans of this work, and it has been and will continue to be a major force for good in the medical ecosystem. But the work that we do at Health Story Collaborative really stands alongside these efforts. Rather than only recruiting tools from the humanities, we're also marshaling tools from the social sciences, right? So the stories we tell about our lives are subjective reconstructions, but we can study them with the tools of science. And that way we can find out what kinds of stories help people and which ones don't so much. And that scientific understanding ought to be especially useful to doctors and to patients and loved ones and everyone in the medical world who are so deeply engaged in the messy process of using science to support health. So although you won't see much of it this afternoon, we want you to know that the work we've done in preparing this event is actually deeply grounded in the science of narrative. Okay, so Annie and I believe, and the science bears it out, that it's not only the process of crafting one's own story of adversity that is therapeutic, but that sharing these stories is also incredibly powerful. So we've done sessions like this in a huge variety of places, from small private living rooms to medical school classrooms to big public events like this one, and now since COVID, virtually. But no matter what the format is or how many people are in attendance, this experience of coming together to share stories is equally potent. For our storytellers, this moment of sharing will inevitably become part of their continually unfolding narratives. And for each of us who get to receive these stories, this window into Chris and Estella's experiences, it provides us a window into other ways of making sense of our own lives. So as you'll see, Chris and Estella are certainly inspiring, but they're not here as role models or as poster children, though as you'll hear, Estella actually was once literally a poster child. They're here as real people. They are individuals who have had to grapple with challenges in their own unique ways. And so their stories broaden all of our horizons about how we too might respond to our own life's adversities. All right, so here's how the event's going to work. First, we're going to hear from Chris, who will share his story. Next, we're going to hear from Estella. After that, we're going to give the two storytellers an opportunity to, if they want to say anything to each other. They have not heard each other's stories before now. And then after that, we'll have this period of Q&A and discussion. So please feel free to use the question function to put your questions whenever they occur to you. But we'll pull together all the questions at the end of the program. And obviously, Chris and Estella, you should feel free to answer or not answer anything that you want during this period of time. So thank you again so much for joining us. And now I'll turn it over to Chris.
Thanks, Jonathan, for that introduction. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you, Chris.
I was paranoid. I managed to avoid turning on the cat filter, which was another concern of mine going into this. Yeah, so thanks, Jonathan, for the introduction. Hi, everyone. It's so wonderful to be here today. So my story begins growing up in Connecticut in the 90s. And if you don't know Connecticut, it's one of those states that tends to get overlooked. We're situated between Boston and New York. There's no remarkable geographic features, no major cities. Everybody in the state kind of disagrees on sports allegiances between Boston and New York, but one of the things that we do have in common that we all rally and unite around is UConn basketball. I remember, watching my first game in 1995 at age 9 and just being absolutely hooked. And growing up, all I wanted to do was play for UConn. After school, I'd shoot hoops in the backyard, pretending I was Ray Allen. I played on town leagues in middle school and high school. Basketball was just always constantly on my mind. I knew I wasn't good enough to play in college. That became apparent when I only grew to be 5'9", but it brought me great joy and comfort to play, even if my skills were limited. I always played basketball carefree because growing up I had full mobility. I could run and jump and dribble and shoot without any limitations. Well, leaping was another story, but in fact, the concept of limitations was not even really on my radar. But that all changed my senior year of high school. October 2003, I was in a car accident. I managed to emerge without injury, but it was a routine blood test that night that came back with worrying results that kind of showed me that I was not as invincible as I thought. I remember it vividly. I was about to be discharged from the hospital after the accident when the doctor walked in and informed me that they needed to take me in for more x-rays. Something called creatine kinase, which is a CK level, which should have been only a few hundred, was actually in the tens of thousands. And CK is a biomarker that indicates how much muscle breakdown is taking place in your body. So level in the tens of thousands indicated that my muscles were breaking down rapidly and at an alarming scale. But why? And that wasn't quite clear. The imaging proved that I didn't have any internal injuries, which is good, but it also didn't rule out why my CK levels are so high. So fast forward a year, and I saw several specialists who ruled out internal injury, liver problems, other serious ailments. And eventually I was diagnosed with a muscle disease I was told was going to manifest in adulthood called, it's known today as limb-girdle muscular dystrophy. It was a strange, unsettling moment to learn that I had a disease when I wasn't exhibiting any symptoms. It didn't add up with my life experiences to date. I had no physical limitations. I played basketball all the time. How are my muscles defective? The neurologist reassured me that weakness wouldn't happen until later in life, perhaps my 30s and 40s when there would likely be a treatment. So I was told not to worry. And given that I was just about to start college and had a lot to look forward to, I took her advice and I pushed it out of my mind. And as long as I was asymptomatic, I wasn't going to worry about it. I was 18 at the time and I had my whole life ahead of me. Besides, the doctors, I had to be wrong. There's just no way that I could possibly have had a muscle disease. So in the fall of 2004, 11 months after the car accident, I began college at Northeastern University in Boston, with this strange diagnosis lingering subtly beneath the surface, but not consciously at the forefront of my mind. Boston was a city that I grew up visiting with my family, the city I chose in the Boston versus New York territorial battles in Connecticut. And to live in the city full time was a thrill. I loved walking around the city. I'd often refuse to take the subway and instead walk to and from different destinations, even if they were miles away. I'd never before lived in a place with so many restaurants and museums, great architecture, people from all walks of life. I was determined to see it and experience all of it. I hung out with friends and went to parties. I was in the thick of the crowds when the Red Sox broke the curse my freshman year in 2004. I didn't flip any cars that night. I don't know if John Novak can say the same, but I love the accessibility of Boston, how everything was within walking distance. I wore down many pairs of sneakers walking that city. All the while, I had no physical restrictions. The disease gradually retreated from my mind those 4 years, and there's no reason to think about it because, again, I just didn't have any symptoms. What I realize now is I had no indication whatsoever that, in reality, I was actually a ticking time bomb. In 2008, I graduated from Northeastern with a degree in marketing, and like a light switch, the symptoms began. I remember going for a run one night after work, and after a few minutes, my legs began to burn and I could no longer run. The rest of my body was willing to continue, but my legs were just having none of it. I thought it was odd, but I didn't really think much about the root cause. I made excuses in my mind. I was stressed. I was working long hours at a financial firm. I had an hour-plus commute on the subway each way. It was boring work and my heart just wasn't into it. I figured I was just tired and run down from hating my job. But deep down, I was unsettled. I was stressed. I remembered the words my pediatric neurologist 5 years ago had told me that, again, someday I'd start to experience weakness and need to visit an adult neurology clinic. And I distinctly remember her saying that it wouldn't happen until later in life. Could it be that what I expected to take place later in life is actually starting to happen now? Despite this initial warning sign, I did nothing. I didn't research the disease or visit the doctor. I tried to chalk it up as just a fluke occurrence. But then, a few months later, I moved to a new apartment, a 2-story walk-up in Boston. And towards the end of the move-in, while carrying a desk chair up the stairs, my legs froze up and I couldn't carry it anymore. I placed the chair down and pulled myself up the final 2 stairs using the railing. I woke up the next day feeling excessively sore and sluggish. The questions and doubts in the back of my mind were just now front and center. The doubt chipped away at my inner resolve. Deep down, I knew that this disease was starting. There were just too many coincidences for this to be pure chance. I knew I just couldn't use work as an excuse anymore. So in November 2009, I took the advice I received 5 years ago and I followed up with a neurologist at Beth Israel Hospital in Boston who confirmed my diagnosis. He was certain, based on my symptoms, that the disease was beginning to manifest. He corrected the initial prognosis and said that it was actually normal for this disease to be starting at my current age, which is 23. I was shocked, not fully able to understand the words that were coming out of his mouth, even though deep down I knew exactly what he was saying. For 5 years since this accident, I had been operating under the false assumption that this disease would hit later in life. To realize that it was happening now and that it'd be severe enough to land me in a wheelchair within a decade was just too much to bear. I remember leaving that day in a state of shock and just sitting down on the bench outside in the waiting room. I just stared blankly out the window into the late afternoon sun. I didn't even care if it blinded me. I just felt like my life as I knew it was over. And as the years passed, the symptoms just continued to progress. In September 2011, I was walking up the hilly part of Washington Street in a neighborhood in Boston called Brighton, where I was living at the time, intending to just pick up some toothpaste at CVS. And as the ground flattened out at the top of the hill, my right knee spasmed and I just gave out and I crumpled to the ground. I remember just being embarrassed and scared, and to collapse under the weight of my own body was the most unsettling feeling that I'd ever felt in my life. It wasn't natural. It wasn't what a body was supposed to be doing at such a young age. In the subsequent few months, falls happened more and more. at home by myself, at work, at the bar in front of dozens of people. Each fall, I had a harder and harder time getting up. Each fall pierced my soul. About a year later, I fell on my way home from work and I couldn't pick myself back up on my own. It was dark, late at night, and I was alone on the street in front of my apartment. I remember I pulled on a nearby fence to get to a standing position, almost causing the wood to break in the process. But then the fence gave out. Exhausted, I crawled over to two parked cars, and with all my might, I lifted myself up, using the bumper of one car and the hood of another. I pulled muscles in both my shoulders in the process, but I was able to get to a standing position. I remember walking home defeated, exhausted, and low on hope. And I knew after that night that this just could not continue. I realized I needed an assistive device, whether it was crutches, leg braces, something. I needed something because I could not go on like this, falling every other day, expending all my energy to get up, or relying on complete strangers to do so. And that's when the magnitude of my disease really hit home. I became depressed, and I started turning down social events, afraid to go somewhere where I might fall in public. I was very sensitive to how I walked, on my heels, how my gait was slowing down. I noticed that when I got on the bus to go home, I had to hold on to the railing to propel myself up, since taking a step unassisted was just getting to be too difficult. And it was embarrassing in front of all those people. I felt like I was carrying a 30-pound weight everywhere. The depression, basically a disinterest in things that used to interest me, fatigue, constant headaches, that sort of thing, got worse when I started to notice the separation between my friends' lives and my own lives. They were getting married, buying houses, getting dogs, having children. I had none of those things. Instead, I was consumed with worry about the state of my body. I could just feel that I was on some sort of downward spiral. Dark thoughts entered my mind. I was wondering, could I handle getting weaker? Could I handle being in a wheelchair someday? What was the end game of all of this? I struggled to think about it. I struggled to think about anything. Many times I just found myself reclining in my desk chair at home, staring out the window, contemplating life. This wasn't how I saw my post-collegiate life going. After a few months, I realized I had to make a choice. As difficult as it was, I knew that this downward spiral either was going to have a terrible ending or I would find a way to turn my life around. But in order to do the latter, I had to change my mindset and refocus. I thought about my life goals and how they were sitting on the back burner unfulfilled. And on a snowy day in 2013, I took out a yellow legal pad, spur of the moment, out of my desk, and I just started writing down my goals. And I just forced myself, no matter what, to make them work. That was the only way. I realized through this exercise that, although difficult, many of my goals were achievable. Writing a book, traveling the world, getting married, that sort of thing. Sure, they'd be more difficult, but they weren't impossible. Excuse me. One such goal was to go to business school. I'd contemplated business school for many years, and every year I would consider going, but then I'd always talk myself out of it. I would say I was too weak, that it was no longer possible, that sort of thing. But this time, I forced myself to do it. I took the GMAT exam and I scored well enough to get into several Boston area schools. In 2014, I quit my job at a startup tech company and enrolled at Boston College's full-time MBA program. It was a huge risk. I had no income coming in, taking on a lot of debt, taking a full slate of classes, moving to a new apartment in a new town, getting used to a new campus. But it was a risk that I wanted to take. I'd gotten to the point where it was just time to see what I was made of. It was time to see if I could live life to the fullest despite this disease. I attended BC's full-time MBA program from 2014 to 2016. And it was, to say, a transformative experience. I met dozens of lifelong friends who I continue to talk to this day. But I didn't know that would be the case when I started the program. I was consumed with doubt. I worried how I'd be perceived. Excuse me. Would I make any friends? Would I be prevented from going to social events, either because I wasn't invited or because it was an inaccessible venue? Would I be able to handle the rigors of early morning classes, tests, or looking for an internship? If I struggled to make friends, would I quit and drop out? These are real questions that I didn't know the answer to until I experienced it. And at first, the evidence was showing me that my disease would be a barrier. I remember during orientation, we had paired off with the person next to us to practice case interviews. And somehow I found myself alone. I couldn't easily get out of the auditorium's flip chair, so I stayed put, content to practice alone. I felt the isolation of my condition and just how different I was. But then, as if someone was reading my mind, someone plopped down in the seat behind me and stuck out their hand. I turned around, and it was a man about my age in glasses and a suit without a tie. He kind of looked like my mirror image. He saw that I was alone and wanted to be my partner. Brian, as it turns out his name was, would become one of my best friends in the program, and we continue to stay in touch until this day. That was kind of an epiphany moment for me. Over the coming weeks and months, I met more and more of my classmates and felt comfortable opening up to them about my condition. What I realized is that my classmates, once I disclosed bit by bit that I had a progressive neuromuscular disease, were really accepting of my condition. They cared for me, they looked out for me, they gave me rides, they carried my backpack. In several instances, they picked me up off the ground after a fall. They became my extended family. In school, I learned a lot about business, although I guess I never really mastered accounting. I spent the summer living in New York City, interning at a large pharma company. I never thought that I would even have the chance to live in New York. I didn't even consider it on my list of goals that day, a few years back. All these experiences combined rebuilt a lot of the confidence that I had lost over the years once I saw that I could do something as difficult as going to business school full time. It was a transformative experience, and it showed me what was still and always would be possible with the right mindset. Thinking back on those 2 years, it taught me a lot about myself and about life. Although my condition has deteriorated significantly, and I am now a full-time wheelchair user, I know that anything is possible. It just might look different in the process. Confidence gained from those 2 years has really set me on a different life trajectory. I learned in business school that I like to do public speaking. I used to be terrified of it. My voice would always crack. And although I haven't talked this long in a while, that doesn't happen anymore. I'd always forget what I was saying mid-sentence, that sort of thing. I'd be terrified to speak, but after business school, I just realized how much I loved it. In the last 5 years, I've given all sorts of talks and been on panels at conferences all over the country. I've written a blog for the last 6 years, and I've been published in several publications. I'm still working on that book. The job I have now, working for the Muscular Dystrophy Association, is one that I really love. But it all hasn't been without its challenges. Any trips to conferences back when we had in-person conferences requires the utmost planning and logistics. I can't fly on planes as easily as I used to. My body is sore after a long day of travel, and I contend with pain 24/7. It hasn't been an easy road. I still think back, and I'm still nostalgic for simpler days when I could just move around easier and I didn't have to worry about falling. Above all, I missed shooting and dribbling basketball. I miss spontaneously going places on a whim, walking all over the city. But life, as I've learned, has been a learning experience. Now, I take solace in connecting with others who are just starting out on their disease journeys. I've experienced a lot of missteps on my journey that I hope to share with others so that they might avoid making the same mistakes. How to handle it mentally, how to seek out help, that sort of thing. I always tell people to seek out help earlier than I did. Don't wait 3+ years and take it all out on yourself. This isn't meant to be shared by yourself. It's meant to be shared with others. And I hope to share that the best way to fight a life-changing disease is to fight it head on. Don't retreat in denial. As I've learned, denial doesn't get you anywhere. Looking back, so much has changed, but so much remains the same. I still watch UConn basketball. I still love Boston. I still can eat an entire calzone in one sitting, although it sticks to me more than it did when I was in college, unfortunately. But life has been a series of unrelenting adjustments. But the things that give life meaning, my family, my friends, I've even mentioned my parents in all of this, have been amazing during this time. My faith, my desire to maximize life with opportunities as they come. That's what makes this strange life worth it, what makes me eager to see what comes next. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris, for sharing so honestly and authentically. And it's really generous of you. And I can say for myself, your story really moved me. So thank you. So now I'm gonna just turn it right over to Estella, who I won't say much about her because she will speak for herself. And then we'll come back together after we hear from Estella. Thank you, Estella.
Thank you, Annie, and Inspire team, and Jonathan and John. That was absolutely incredible. So thank you for sharing your story. Yes, my name is Estela Lugo, and the name of my story is The Diary of a Disabled Girl. And it starts in 1996. Damn it, damn it, damn it. My panic echoed off the chocolate marble vanity, bouncing off its shiny gold fixtures and into a rising pile of lemon-scented suds. It had only been 2 short days since I had convinced my father to reluctantly pay a whopping $80 for a brand new tuxedo. I wasn't sure what hurt more now, the fact that I had wasted his hard-earned money or the sharp and familiar pains of humiliation and failure. The platter-sized stains had grown even larger now in the wall-to-wall mirrors. Even through my blurry tears, I could still see it staring back with scathing judgment. What the hell were you thinking? A waitress? Really? I continued scrubbing through the layers of stubborn marinara sauce, praying that no one from the staff or wedding party would walk in to find a defeated and disabled teen girl experiencing one of the most humiliating moments of her life. How in the world was I ever going to have a job with this stupid disease? I could still see the look of concern on the guest faces from earlier that evening. One woman had even declined my offer to pour her tea after noticing my uneasy grip on the pot handle. In concern for her own safety, she insisted on pouring it herself, while throwing me a look that clearly stated, "Girlfriend, you are not coming near me with that pot of scalding hot water." And she was completely right. I had no business thinking that I could be a waitress, not with these clumsy hands and hazardous feet. I was a danger to myself, and now I was a danger to others. I wish that I could say that there was a time in my life when I felt normal, but there really isn't. Some of my first memories include sitting on the number rug in kindergarten and showing off my new plastic leg braces to friends. I mean, it didn't really seem to bother me back then, but as the years passed, my confidence took on more and more hits. But back to 1988. I was in 3rd grade now and needed a runner for softball. I was getting tagged out way more than anyone else on the team, and my mom had finally decided to talk to my coaches. Easy fly balls were dropping right through my mitt, and as much as my poor parents tried to oil, stretch, and wear down that leather, it still felt like concrete every time I put it on. My most recent dance recital had been more stressful than exciting. I could stay up only about 2 or 3 seconds now on my ankles before my ankles gave way and dropped me right back down to my feet. So at the ripe old age of 8, I hung up my ballet slippers and declared retirement. 2 years later, my cleats and mitt joined them in hopes that one day I'd find my thing. But despite the regular moments of disappointment, life was still pretty damn good. I had 2 incredible Puerto Rican parents whose lives and hearts revolved around me and my younger sister, Melissa. Despite not having any family history, Miguel and Anita had been dealt Powerball odds of having not one, but both of their daughters diagnosed with Charcot-Marie tooth, also known as CMT, before the age of 4. All they had been told by doctors was that their daughters' hands and feet would progressively weaken over time and that there were no treatments or cure. Where many families could have fallen victim to shame, self-pity, and despair, my incredible parents decided to become overnight advocates. 1987. I mailed your photo to some people the other day, my mom said, as she brushed my hair into a tight ponytail. They want you to be the poster child for Long Island. Mom, what? What does that even mean, a poster child? They want us to take photos at their events and help them raise money for a cure. Now, I do not remember formally agreeing to this poster child thing, but I do remember that soon after that conversation, my family's life was forever changed. Every weekend between 1987 and 1992 involved us traveling to some kind of fundraising event, sometimes even 2 or 3 in one weekend. And it wasn't just taking pictures either. We were speaking in front of crowds of people, being interviewed on local news channels, meeting celebrities like Sammy Davis Jr. and Ron Darling. Sometimes we'd even put on impromptu lip singing contests at high school dance-a-thons. Did I mention this was the 80s? Anyway, they were some of the greatest years of our lives. And one of the best parts of it all was the healing that it provided for our family. Advocacy had quite literally turned my parents' pain into purpose, while also building up my sister and I's confidence. We were exposed to a world of passionate and generous and caring people. We grew up experiencing the importance of volunteer work, service, and community. And we developed a deep sense of humility and gratitude for the challenges we did have, because we now personally knew many families whose daily battles dwarfed our own. But like all good things, they must come to an end. Melissa and I eventually aged out of our poster child status and into tweens with social lives. My parents still ran the local volunteer chapter, as well as the annual telethon call center. Mom went back to working full time, and well, life was just busier. 1992. Am I really not going to have to wear leg braces anymore? I had anxiously asked the same question during every appointment for the past year, terrified of hearing a different answer. I don't see why not, kiddo. You'll have all the support you need after we straighten you out, Dr. Gruber said in his warm New York accent, as he reached into his white coat pocket, pulling out a voice recorder to document his latest observations. He was a well-respected and kind surgeon with a full head of salt and pepper hair, who never had less than 3 or 4 med students parading behind him in and out of every room. He'd poke at my motionless and twisted feet, inviting them to take a closer look, while he used big words like atrophy and dorsiflexion. It was early June of 6th grade when both my leg casts were finally cut off. It had been 12 long and painful weeks of recovery. For the first of those, the rigid white plaster had wrapped all the way up my thighs, stopping only a few inches to where my New Kids on the Block underwear started. This made showering and bathroom time loads of fun. For almost 2 months, my day mainly consisted of being carried from my bed to the bathroom and back to the bed. One weekend, we got hit with a nor'easter. My parents bundled me up as best they could, layering blankets over my legs and open toes, before wheeling me outside onto the freshly shoveled walkway. Dad positioned me right up against the base of our snowman, while Mom handed me fistfuls of packed snow to slap on top of the torso. I belly laughed as my sister did her ridiculous Christmas story impression, falling back into the snow and flailing her arms as she attempted to get back up. By Easter, I was using crutches to get around. It felt so good to be vertical again. The air was blooming with new possibilities, and it felt energizing to know the most difficult days were now behind me. Dr. Gruber had successfully fused and straightened my floppy and crooked feet into a 90-degree angle, just as promised. My new mission that summer was to learn to walk again in time for my first day of junior high school. I had already begun clipping out back to school looks from my teen magazines, plaid skirts and grungy floral dresses. You know, that the kind that Drew Barrymore and Courtney Love wore, complete with white tees and shiny Doc Marten boots. No more braces meant that I could finally bare my legs without feeling like some kind of freak. I would finally fit in. 1993. The bell rang for home economics class. Shit, I mumbled under my breath as I scurried faster past the cafeteria. I was late again. The halls were now empty except for a few of the bad kids, loudly and obnoxiously trailing behind me. They were the school of misfits, regularly getting kicked out of class for talking back to teachers and causing chaos. And for some reason, this made them even more popular. I had just turned the corner of the arts hallway when suddenly I noticed an abrupt and eerie silence. Instinctively, I turned my head. My heart sank. There, no less than 12 feet behind me, was the leader of the pack, Kenny, doing his best impression of my awkward gait. His groupies cupping their mouths, laughing breathlessly. I went home in tears that day and told my parents that Dr. Gruber was an asshole and a liar. I needed my braces back. 2009. Devin, how are we supposed to get anywhere if you don't let mommy buckle you in? By now, we were both laughing so hard that no sound was coming out from either one of us. Another 30 seconds of this, and we'd both be peeing ourselves, which would have been much more acceptable for a 2-year-old boy in diapers than his 29-year-old mother in yoga pants. We went through this sequence pretty much every time we had to go anywhere. I could rarely get a full grip on his car seat buckle, which left me no choice but to assist with my mouth. Now, this easily should have been a 10-second operation, except for the fact that Devin was the most ticklish baby I had ever known. The minute my face pressed up against his belly, he was squealing and pulling my hair for mercy, which would only send me bursting into laughter and him howling even louder. Motherhood had found me early in life. I had fallen head over heels with the first guy who had asked me out in high school, and we married the summer after my graduation from the Fashion Institute of Technology. Originally, I had set my eyes on becoming a fashion designer, but that dream deviated into a bachelor's in interior design. Sometime during my senior year of high school, I had realized that just because my hands were able to draw beautiful runway designs, it didn't necessarily mean that they were strong enough to sew them. Still, I found much enjoyment and challenge in my new major. The campus was small and, for the most part, accessible. I was thrilled to learn that my CMT qualified me for campus housing, despite the fact that I was only a 45-minute train ride from home. I'd finally be able to experience living on my own without having anyone trying to do everything for me. 2016. You're helpless. I'm out here killing myself, working 2 jobs, and you're home designing stickers and giving your time away like we're millionaires. Actually, I'm raising our kids, running half the business, and taking care of the house. Or did you forget those small details? I'm volunteering with people who are actually trying to cure my disease. Not that you care to notice anyway. Here we go again. How about getting a real job like every other woman I know? I've broken it down a million times. By the time we pay for daycare, there's not going to be anything left. We went back and forth like this for years, until it was clear that the marriage was going to be the end of both of us. At 36, it had become blatantly clear that the relationship had done more damage to my spirit than my actual disease. Piece by jagged piece, we resentfully sorted through 20 years, boxing up coloring books, bills, and family photos from happier times. The forms for my upcoming Social Security disability appointment sat on top of the mounting pile. My date had been set for April 17th. I felt both terrified and relieved at the same time. 2019. I got you, babe. Stay right there. I'll step in first and help you in, okay? My boyfriend Jason carefully postured himself, legs wide, as he raised his long arms to form 2 human railings. I grabbed faithfully onto each, dropping down onto the black laggard cabin as I let out an audible breath of relief. Good job, birthday girl, he said, as I laughed and straightened out my short green summer dress. I could have fallen head first into that water, and still I would have come up smiling ear to ear. My eyes widened as they desperately attempted to take in the overwhelming beauty around us, sporadically bouncing from each intricate carving of the bow, and across the sparkling horizon of ancient balustrades, Gothic arches, and marble balconies. A string of deep red celebratory pom-poms danced along each side of the gondola as we pushed off from the Venetian pier and into the warm June air. Put your feet up here, Jason motioned. Let's get some quick shots of your braces in this light. I raised both legs up onto the wood platform and turned them into the setting sun for optimal framing. They had been sponsored by a German orthotics company, and part of my job with the Hereditary Neuropathy Foundation, aside from attending our annual neurology conference, was to test and photograph them across our 10-day tour of Italy. I know, it's a tough gig, right? A few months back, when it had been time to select a color from the massive chain of vinyl chips, I had stopped instinctively on this particular one. At first, it appeared as a dull and boring gray, until that is, you held it in direct sunlight. in which case it became an iridescent display of every color all at once, brilliantly transforming my legs to some magical rainbow show. I turned to Jay and teasingly said, "Aren't they beautiful?" He snapped one more photo and then looked up at me and said, "Yes, you are." 2020. Low battery. The notification startled me, instantly snapping me back into my now dim bedroom. How long had I been online? The growing sting in my eyes swiftly answered, "Too long." I closed them, rolling my heavy head from side to side until my stiff neck cracked with relief. Dozens of red dots still imprinted in my mind, each representing nearby cities and growing clusters of confirmed cases. "That's enough for now," I said, pushing up from the desk and reaching for the cord to my battery pack. I walked over to the far side of the bed where my headphones still sat from the previous night. The word "Bose," now tinted with dark hues of auburn, from the window above. Outside, the yard had been covered in a fresh white blanket of snow, all except for the in-ground pool, whose rigid lines had now been perfectly curved and softened into a small crystal pond. Not exactly the scene I had pictured for the end of the world. I smoothed out the thin purple yoga mat underneath my feet, regaining my balance as I scrolled through my playlist for my go-to track and pressed loop. Spacing each foot along the edges of the mat, I placed my hands down flat, leaning into my palms as they brushed against the tip of my sneakers. All of those torturous years of being stretched in PT had paid off. At 39, I was now half human, half pretzel. I'd often credit my abnormal flexibility with keeping my bones intact from hundreds of falls. One year I counted 62. Many times I'd laugh them off, saying things like, "I don't break, I bend," to comfort Jay and the kids. This new storm felt heavier, though. This storm was a global one, a pandemic. I unclenched my jaw and inhaled deeply until each crevice of my lungs were full. The sea of questions and uncertainty slowly faded into the tiny mat and bumps in front of me. My attention shifted towards my tingling fingertips and the lavender letters printed above them, Gaiam. After years of staring at this odd word, I had only just recently learned its Greek translation. I am Mother Earth. I exhaled as a tear dropped in between my fingers. My heart felt heavy for what was to come, but also so grateful for this familiar and sacred space I had found so many years ago. The melody and lyrics began again. Hold on to me, because I'm a little unsteady, a little unsteady. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Estella, for sharing that incredibly evocative, poignant story. So now we'd like to open it up for Estella and Chris to just say anything, having heard each other's stories. Some of you have already put some questions into the question box, and I've got those ready to go. But first, let's just hear, I'm curious, Chris and Estella, how each other's stories resonated for you.
I know for me, just there was so much in your story, Estella, that I could relate to in terms of, you know, the progression of assistive devices. I had leg braces myself. I felt like I remember feeling like Forrest Gump the first time that I put on my leg braces, but then I'm like, oh, I can kind of have a bounce in my step. Then I almost tipped over, but that's another story. The crutches, the jokes, kind of, you know, it's almost like it's a defense mechanism when you fall, almost to reassure the person that fell, because sometimes I feel like the people around you are almost more scared of your fall than you are. There's just a lot that I can relate to, and it just kind of goes to show, it's like you don't even have to have the same exact disease, even the same exact physical symptoms have such, you know, commonality in terms of emotions, in terms of, you know, outlook on life and dealing with, you know, the setbacks and adversity throughout the day. I just thought that your story was beautifully told.
Thank you. Yeah, Chris, I definitely a lot of your story resonated with me as well, especially the falls and the dependence on strangers for help when you venture out into into the world and are unsure if, the spaces are going to be accessible, or whether you're going to be able to open a door handle, and like small, small details all the way to the big details. And there's kind of like this unseen faith that you have to kind of have in humanity, that you will always find somebody willing to help you. And I think that's kind of like a beautiful piece of disability, is that you get to kind of see, you get to interact with strangers in ways that not everyone gets to. So I definitely resonated with a lot of your story and the vulnerability in that.
It's a good point. So I feel like, yeah, like exactly. You kind of, we're so used to seeing the worst in humanity and everything throughout the day, but like, in those little moments, you do kind of see the best when people hold the door open for you, or they ask to carry something for you if they see you kind of struggling to carry things.
Right.
That's been kind of one of those little hidden blessings that I didn't think of, obviously, when I started to have symptoms, like, oh, like, I see the best in humanity someday. Like, just one of those things that you kind of learn about over the years as you experience it, and it's one of the things that makes it definitely tolerable.
So let me bring up some of the questions. There's already some sort of themes that are emerging. So a bunch of folks, Jackie and Claire in particular, but there may be a few more that have popped in, are asking really about the mental health side of this. Jackie writes about feeling sort of stuck in the depths after her surgeries and the challenges of recovering during COVID. And a bunch of the questions are about, how can I see my way towards resilience? So what do you have to say to these folks who really are feeling stuck in the depths right now?
I would say the way that I kind of navigate those moments, I mean, to provide empathy for yourself and allow that space where you need to grieve for your body and grieve for the things that you've lost, but also give yourself almost like a capsule to do that in, or maybe it's, give yourself a few days to feel like that, but know that, okay, next week I'm gonna put some effort into getting into a better place. And that includes, taking care of the things that we put in our body. I know for me, it's a lot about physical health and nutrition and staying active. And I don't think exercise, there's a lot of things that we can do for our body exercise wise, whether we're in a chair or, we're able to run a marathon. I feel like just movement is medicine, as we say at H&F. So I think just kind of finding some kind of distraction to move our body, or some form of expression, like through music, is one of my great tools. And also, connecting with other people so that we don't feel isolated, and knowing that moments like this where we get to share our story can help others. So, helping others is such a powerful therapy. It has been for me. And yeah.
I would echo everything that Estella said. I kind of have this sort of like 90-10 rule. I don't know if it's unique to me or not, but basically, we're so worried about handling things perfectly 100% of the time, being happy 100% of the time, but it's just not how life is. And, it's almost like a spectrum. On one hand, you have the people that can't handle it well at all, that kind of become jaded. I've seen those people, but then there's also the people that are just like artificially like, oh, I just like fell and broke my leg today, but at least it's sunny out. Just like the people that are like super like optimistic, that I think everybody hates as much. Not hate, but gets frustrated by. I think really the best place to be is just to kind of, just strive for like 80 to 90% of the time, just trying to be, in a good mood and trying to be productive. And just because that, 10 to 20% allows you to have an opportunity to sulk and to say like, I'm really having a bad day, like this sucks. I think it's not healthy to bury those feelings. I did that for many years and it did not go so well for me early on. And I just kind of gotten to this point where it's just like, if I can be, optimistic and as happy as I can be, and productive and forward thinking, as much as I can, I still have a little bit of leeway where if I'm just not having a good day, or if I'm sore, or if I'm just frustrated because I fell again, to sulk for a little bit. And as Estella said, just don't let that kind of consume you and just overtake you. And then everything she had said regarding, connecting with other people and sharing your story. I think one of the surprising findings of my experience was how, other stories helped me, but also how, what I thought was just my, ordinary story, there are pieces of that other people kind of take away from it, and I got a lot out of it. And I realized it's kind of like a circle. It's just, you're helped by other people's stories, and your own story helps other people, because there's always something that somebody can relate to, that might be able to help them. I found that to be very rewarding.
Yeah, let me hop in because there are some questions about that. And obviously, Annie and I believe in the power of telling stories, but there's some questions in there about, I think I want to do this, but I feel kind of shy about doing it. How would I even start? And then there's another question here about, okay, so you're both telling your story in these sort of high profile ways. How do I tiptoe down that road of what? So the first part is sort of like, how do you deal with your own qualms about sharing your story? And then how do you share it more broadly?
I think for me, this is where the power of social media comes in, because I think, it can be a tool for good and it can be a tool for not so good. So for me, I made it a point to kind of take inventory of the people that I follow on social media. I found people who became my role models, and I studied what they were doing, how they approached life, how they shared their ups and downs, and then it gave me the bravery to start doing the same. And that just started with, one post on social media saying, hey, this is me, this is my disease. I just fell today, and sometimes my life is not all, rainbow and butterflies, like everybody puts their best out on social media. So it's having having that moment of vulnerability, and that's real, and that's what anyone can connect to, is just being real. So.
But I would just add to that there's, anybody has a story worth sharing, and you don't have to be a professional speaker from day one. If you could have seen me speak back in like before, I started doing this more regularly, again, my voice would crack. I'd just be sweaty. I'd pull out my note card and I'm gonna forget everything. There's no magic, formula for becoming a speaker. You just kind of have to do it, and you just have to have confidence that your story does matter. Your story does have an impact on somebody else. You don't have to tell a perfect story. Again, you're just telling your own story, and I'm just going to realize it's a lot easier also to speak about yourself than it is to speak about, some other topic. So, and nobody's going to fact check necessarily your story word for word. So if you're just kind of, telling it, and things might be out of order timeline wise, it's not a huge deal. I'd just say, if you're wondering if you can do it, I would just definitely say you can. You want to start small. You want to share one experience. You want to share one story. You don't have to share your entire patient experience, but maybe, something happened to you that day that you wanted to share with people. Again, social media has many downsides, but one of the upsides is a lot of people can relate to you. A lot of people are dealing with and going through the exact same thing. And that's, I've made a lot of friends that way on Twitter, of all places, just, sharing experiences. And now I have a lot of really great friends that can understand what I'm going through. And, there's a lot of power in that. So I definitely just say, don't be afraid. And, again, over time, you'll get better at it, and you'll become more polished.
Great. I know it's 5 o'clock, so we're going to start to wind down in just a minute. Yeah, do you want to add anything, Eric?
I can go ahead and finish us off here. And I just want to say thank you to Estella, Chris, Annie, and Dr. Adler, of course, and to all the attendees for this program. You can learn more about Inspire at www.inspire.com and about Health Story Collaborative at www.healthstorycollaborative.org. And we hope that you have a great rest of the day. I hope everybody stays safe. And once again, thank you to our speakers with the great patient stories. And we hope to do more in the future.
Thanks, Eric. Thank you, Estella,
Thank
and
you.
Chris, so much.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great
right.
day.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.